Hey guys, hope you're doing well. In this video we'll be learning about one of the most important networking devices, which is called a firewall. So let's get started. Now, what is a firewall? Well, a firewall is basically a network security system which controls the incoming and outgoing network traffic based on predetermined rules. Well, there are a number of threats and attacks a firewall can protect your network from. Well, in order to understand how a firewall works, you need to understand the difference between these two terms, stateless and stateful. Now, a stateless firewall doesn't care about the state of the connection that is being made. It simply looks at each packet individually and makes a decision. Well, there are three main types of firewalls: software firewalls, hardware firewalls, and cloud firewalls. Software firewalls are installed on an individual computer and they protect that computer from the network. They can be installed on servers as well as on desktops and laptops. Hardware firewalls are separate devices that sit on your network and they protect your entire network. And this type of firewall operates at the application layer of the OSI model, and it examines the contents of the payload to determine whether or not to allow or block traffic. Application proxy firewalls are often used to protect against web application attacks such as cross-site scripting and SQL injection attacks. So the first example of a firewall is Packet Tracer itself, and if you want to learn more about networking, then you can click on this playlist right over here, and if you want to become a network expert, then you can click on this video right over here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. And you can use Packet Tracer to create your own firewall, and you can learn how a firewall works by actually building one in Packet Tracer. Another example of a firewall is the Windows Firewall, which is a software firewall that comes with Windows and it can be configured from the Windows Settings app. Then we have another software firewall which is called Zone Alarm, and Zone Alarm is a third-party firewall that you can install on your Windows PC. Some examples of hardware firewalls are the Cisco ASA, the Fortinet FortiGate, and the Palo Alto Networks PA300 series. Cloud firewalls are managed as a service and they offer a centralized way to manage multiple firewalls across different environments. The firewall receives requests from the client and then forwards the request to the server. If you're liking this video, and if you want me to make more videos like this, then please let me know by giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel so that you get notified whenever I post a new video. Once the server responds, the firewall examines the response and then forwards it back to the client. Proxy-based firewalls are often used to protect against attacks such as denial of service attacks. Whether to allow or block it based on the rules that are configured on the firewall. Whereas a stateful firewall keeps track of the state of the connection. So the first type of firewall is a packet filtering firewall, and this type of firewall is also known as a first-generation firewall. Stateful inspection firewalls are more advanced than packet filtering firewalls, and they operate at the application layer of the OSI model. Now, these types of firewalls can detect and prevent application layer attacks, but they are also more complex to configure than packet filtering firewalls. Packet filtering firewalls are the simplest type of firewall, and they operate at the network layer or the transport layer of the OSI model. Now, these types of firewalls are very fast and they can handle a large amount of traffic, but they also have some limitations. For example, they cannot detect or prevent application layer attacks such as SQL injection attacks or cross-site scripting attacks. This means it keeps track of the three-way handshake that occurs when a connection is made between two hosts. Now, the three-way handshake is the process where a client sends a SYN packet to a server. Next-generation firewalls are even more advanced than stateful inspection firewalls, and they can detect and prevent more sophisticated attacks. NGFWs also provide other features such as intrusion prevention, malware detection, and web filtering. NGFWs can also operate at all layers of the OSI model, which makes them very versatile. Once the server receives the SYN packet, it sends back a SYN ACK packet to the client. And once the client receives the SYN ACK packet, it sends an ACK packet back to the server, and this completes the three-way handshake. So a stateful firewall keeps track of the entire connection and not just individual packets. You'll notice that a firewall is placed between your internal network and the internet. So here we have a client and a server, and the client is trying to connect to the server. So whenever a new connection is established, a new entry is added to the state table, and when a connection is closed, the entry is removed from the state table. So when a stateful firewall receives a packet, it first consults the state table to see if there is an existing connection for this packet. If there is, then the packet is allowed to pass through the firewall, otherwise it is blocked. Now the client sends a SYN packet to the server and the server receives the SYN packet, but it doesn't respond immediately. Instead, the server saves the SYN packet in a buffer along with the client's IP address and port number. After some time, if another SYN packet arrives from the same client, the server will check the SYN packet against the entry in the buffer. If they match, then the server will respond with a SYN-ACK packet, otherwise it will drop the packet. So basically, a stateless firewall works in a similar manner. It simply looks at each packet individually and makes a decision whether to allow or block it based on the rules that are configured on the firewall. This is because a firewall is used to protect your internal network from the internet, which is basically an untrusted network. And this is because the internet is open to everyone and anyone can access your network via the internet, which means there is no authentication or authorization performed when someone tries to access your network over the internet. And this makes your network vulnerable to various attacks and threats. So that is why a firewall is used between your internal network and the untrusted network, such as the internet. For example, it can protect your network from someone who tries to brute force their way into your network by guessing passwords or by using weak passwords. A firewall can also protect your network from someone who tries to scan your network to find open ports or vulnerabilities. It can also protect your network from someone who tries to run malicious code or software on your network. And lastly, a firewall can also protect your network from someone who tries to steal data or information from your network. Now these rules could allow or could deny the traffic to or from a particular source IP address or a network. It could also control the traffic based on the ports that are being used, or it could also control the traffic based on the protocols that are being used. So basically, a firewall is like a wall which protects your internal network from any external threats coming from outside. You can also think of a firewall as a security guard, which checks the credentials of people trying to enter your organization's network and only allows access to those who have proper authorization. Now, what kind of threats does a firewall protect your network from? Now, if you take a look at this diagram, now how does a firewall work? So now let's take an example to see how a stateless and a stateful firewall would handle a connection. A stateful firewall, on the other hand, maintains a state table which contains information about all the active connections. Now, what are the different types of firewalls? Now let's take a look at the different types of firewalls based on their functionality. The next type of firewall is a stateful inspection firewall, and this type of firewall is also known as a second-generation firewall. The next type of firewall is a next-generation firewall, and this type of firewall is also known as a third-generation firewall. Next, we have an application proxy firewall. Now lastly, we have a proxy-based firewall, and this type of firewall acts as an intermediary between the client and the server. Now, before we move ahead, so now let's take a look at some of the examples of firewalls. So that was all about firewalls.